The silence in the old Victorian house was a physical presence, a heavy velvet curtain that had fallen after the final act of Eleanor's life. I stood in her kitchen, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I hadn't asked for, the steam carrying the ghost of her favorite lavender soap. A week since the funeral, and the world still felt tilted off its axis. The lawyer's call had been a pinprick of light in the fog, a specific item, he'd said, mentioned in her will for me. A personal effect. A final touch from the woman who had been my mentor, my champion, the architect of my career. But it wasn't an object waiting for me. It was her daughter. Maya stood across from me, leaning against the Aga stove, her arms crossed over a simple gray sweater. The girl I remembered from strained holiday dinners, a sullen silhouette glowering from the stairs, was gone. This woman was all quiet intensity, her dark hair a messy crown, her feet bare on the cold flagstones. Her gaze, the color of aged whiskey, held mine with an unnerving steadiness. The lawyer said there was something for me. I finally ventured, my voice too loud in the consuming quiet. She nodded, a single, slow dip of her chin. There is. She pushed away from the stove and took the seat opposite me, her movements fluid and deliberate. But it's not a thing. It's me. The words didn't make sense. They hung in the air between us, strange and ill-fitting. I must have misheard. My mother's last wish, she continued, her voice a low, husky vibration that seemed to resonate in my very bones, was for me to tell you a secret. A secret she kept from you, about you. She took a shaky breath, the first crack in her composed facade. She made me promise I would only tell you after she was gone. She said you were the only one who would understand, the only one I could trust. The air vanished from my lungs. A secret? From Eleanor? The woman who had seen every crack in my professional armor, every moment of self-doubt, and had met them with unwavering belief. What part of me did she not know? And why entrust its revelation to Maya, her distant, often resentful daughter? I stared at this woman, this beautiful, sorrowful keeper of a truth that felt like a threat to my very foundation, and the ground beneath me felt less solid than it had a moment before. The following days were a study in distraction. My sleek, minimalist apartment, once a sanctuary of order, felt like a sterile cage. I'd traced the lines of my blueprints, but my mind was elsewhere, trapped in that warm kitchen, replaying the weight of Maya's unfinished sentence. A secret about you. The phrase became a splinter in my psyche, festering. Sleep was a fleeting visitor, chased away by the image of her serious eyes and the vulnerable curve of her mouth. Driven by a compulsion I didn't understand, I found myself back at the Victorian house 4 days later. This time, Maya answered the door in paint-splattered overalls, a streak of vermilion drying on her forearm. She looked at me, not with surprise, but with a quiet expectation. "I'm sorting through the studio," she stated, stepping back to let me pass. "Your help would be useful." It wasn't a request, and I was profoundly grateful for the directive, for a task to anchor me in the unbearable limbo of not knowing. I followed her up the narrow, winding stairs to the top-floor studio. The room was a glorious chaos, a stark contrast to Eleanor's meticulously ordered professional life. Canvases leaned against every wall, tubes of paint littered a large work table, and the air was thick and heady with the sense of turpentine and linseed oil. This was her private world, a landscape of pure emotion she had rarely shared. Maya moved through the disorder with a quiet reverence, beginning to sort through portfolios. I started on a stack of sketches, my fingers brushing over charcoal lines that felt like stolen whispers. Then I found it, tucked behind an old easel, a small canvas. It was a portrait of me. I was younger, seated at this very table, my head bent over a sketch pad, my brow furrowed in concentration. Eleanor had painted me not with the critical eye of a mentor, but with a soft, almost tender affection that made my throat tighten. "She saw you." Maya's voice was close, a warm breath near my ear. I hadn't heard her approach. Her presence was a solid heat at my back. "She saw the weight you carried, the relentless drive for perfection. She admired your strength, but she feared the cost of it." Her proximity sent a jolt through my system, a live wire of awareness. I could smell the clean, soapy scent of her skin beneath the sharp odor of paint. I set the portrait down carefully, my fingers trembling. "Why show me this?" I asked, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "Because you need to see it," she said, her words simple and devastating. "Before I tell you the rest." She returned to her work, and we spent the afternoon in a silence that slowly transformed from awkward to companionable. She would occasionally hold up a landscape, a stormy sea, a vase of wilted peonies, and offer a quiet anecdote about its creation, gifting me glimpses of a more personal, vulnerable Eleanor. I found my eyes constantly drawn to Maya. I watched the way she bit her lip in concentration, the graceful arc of her wrist as she lifted a heavy portfolio, the way a genuine, unguarded smile would occasionally soften the line of her mouth. The ghost of the resentful girl had vanished. This woman was substantial, her grief a palpable force that echoed my own, drawing me in. The moment came as I stretched to reach a box on a high shelf. She was there in an instant, one hand coming to rest on my arm to steady me, the other reaching past my shoulder. Her body pressed lightly against my back for a single, heart-stopping second. A current, sharp and electric, arced between us. We both froze. The very air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with a potential so immense it was terrifying. Her hand on my arm felt like a brand. Our eyes met over my shoulder, and in that suspended silence, the secret, the grief, everything faded, but the startling, beautiful reality of her. A storm was brewing a few nights later, the wind whipping around the corners of my apartment building. The emptiness of the place was suddenly suffocating. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was in my car, driving through the lashing rain back to the one place that, against all odds, felt like a destination. She opened the library door, a fire roaring in the hearth, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. I went straight to the flames, holding out my hands, my skin chilled and pebbled. I couldn't stay away, I whispered, the confession torn from a place of raw need. This silence, this not knowing what she thought I needed to hear, it's unraveling me. She came to stand beside me, her shoulder almost touching mine. "I know," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the fire. "It's been a weight in my chest for months. Carrying it for her. Carrying it for you." She turned then, and her hand rose, not to take mine, but to gently brush a wet strand of hair from my cheek. Her fingertips were a whisper against my skin, yet the touch resonated through me like a shockwave. My breath caught. My eyes fluttered closed for a second, savoring the fleeting contact. When I opened them, she was closer. The scant inches between us had evaporated. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, could see the flecks of green and gold in her hazel eyes, the faint pulse at the base of her throat. The world narrowed to this room, to the crackle of the fire and the drumming rain, to the impossible space between our lips. "Maya," I breathed, a plea and a surrender. That was all the invitation she needed. She closed the final distance, and her lips met mine. It was not a gentle, questioning kiss. It was a conflagration. It was the sudden, violent shattering of a dam I hadn't known I was building my whole life. It was the answer to a question my soul had been asking in a language I didn't understand. Her lips were soft yet insistent, moving against mine with a desperate, hungry certainty. My hands flew to her face, cradling her jaw, my fingers tangling in the soft, loose hairs at the nape of her neck. She tasted of peppermint tea and the storm, and something uniquely, essentially her. Her arms wrapped around me, pulling my body flush against hers, and every nerve ending I possessed was set alight. This was not merely desire, it was recognition. It was a homecoming to a place I never knew existed. When we broke apart, gasping for air, our foreheads rested together. Our breaths mingled, hot and ragged. "The secret," I whispered against her lips, terrified that speaking would break the spell. "Not yet," she murmured, her voice raw with a shared emotion. Just this. For now." And she kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, a kiss that was both a promise and a question, a kiss that held the ghosts of the past and the terrifying, brilliant hope of a future. Just a quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here on Sapphic Tales. Later, when the fire had dwindled to embers, she simply took my hand. Her fingers laced through mine with a natural, easy intimacy that made my heart ache with a sweetness I hadn't known was possible. She led me upstairs, not to a spare room, but to her own. Her bedroom was a sanctuary, a reflection of its occupant, bohemian, layered, and deeply personal. Faded tapestries draped the walls, books were stacked precariously on the nightstand, and the air carried her scent, sandalwood and fresh linen. We undressed in the dim light from the hallway, our movements shy and slow, turning away from each other in a sudden, sweet modesty. I slipped under the heavy duvet in my underwear and tank top, my skin humming with a live-wire awareness. Then she was there, sliding in beside me, her body a warm, solid line in the darkness. She didn't hesitate. She turned onto her side and fitted herself against my back, her arms sliding around my waist, her hand splaying flat and warm against my stomach. Her knees tucked up behind mine. It was a perfect, seamless spooning embrace, her body curving into mine as if we were designed to fit this way. Her breath was a soft, steady rhythm against the back of my neck. And then, a miracle. Every perpetually tense muscle in my body, the ones that kept me upright in boardrooms, the ones that clenched during deadlines, the armor I wore every day, simply went limp. A shuddering sigh of release escaped me, a breath I felt I had been holding for a decade. Tears, hot and silent, welled in my eyes and seeped into the pillow. It wasn't grief. It was the profound, staggering relief of finally being allowed to stop, to just be. Her thumb began to move, making slow, deliberate circles on my stomach, right over the hard, clenched knot of anxiety that was my constant companion. Right there, I whispered into the darkness, my voice cracking with the vulnerability of the admission. She made a soft, understanding sound in the back of her throat, and her touch grew firmer, more focused, soothing the tightness, consciously unraveling the walls I carried within my very flesh. We lay like that for a long time, listening as the storm outside gentled into a soft patter against the window pane. There were no whispered secrets, no professions of love, no promises for tomorrow. There was just this, the syncopated rhythm of our breathing slowly falling into sync, the solid, reassuring warmth of her body wrapped around mine, the profound, absolute safety of her touch. I had never felt so utterly vulnerable, and I had never felt so unshakably strong. In the dark, in the arms of my mentor's daughter, I fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep of my adult life. I woke to the weak, gray light of a rain-washed dawn. I was still wrapped in her arms, but sometime in the night we had shifted, and now we were facing each other. Her face was serene in sleep, all the guarded lines softened, her lips slightly parted. I studied her, this beautiful, complicated woman who had crashed into my life like a meteorite, altering its landscape forever. My gaze traced the elegant arch of her brow, the sweep of her dark lashes against her cheek, the delicate shell of her ear. I wanted to commit every detail to memory. As if feeling the weight of my gaze, her eyes fluttered open. There was no moment of disorientation, no surprise at finding me there. She simply looked at me, her hazel eyes clear and soft with sleep. A slow, sleepy smile touched her lips, a sight so purely beautiful it made my chest ache. She leaned forward and brushed her lips against mine. A good morning kiss. A soft, closed-mouth press of lips that was, somehow, more intimate than all the desperate, fiery kisses that had come before. It was a kiss that assumed a shared day, a shared future. It was a kiss that felt like a beginning. We spent the day in a bubble, a world of two. We made coffee in the big, warm kitchen, our shoulders and hips brushing as we moved around each other in a silent, easy dance. We took our mugs back to her bed and talked for hours, the words flowing now, easy and unforced. She told me about her life as a freelance illustrator, her solitary travels, her past relationships with men that never felt right, a fundamental disconnect she could never name. I told her about the immense pressure of my career, the hollow ring of my successes, the countless lonely nights in my perfectly appointed, empty apartment. We were two separate, lonely narratives, finally weaving themselves into a single, coherent story. In the afternoon, We found ourselves back in the library, surrounded by the physical remnants of her mother's life. The secret hung between us still, but its quality had changed. It felt less like a threatening storm cloud and more like a shared burden we were now strong enough to lift together. We sat on the large, worn sofa, our legs tucked up, facing each other. The late afternoon light was fading, painting the room in deep blues and long shadows. I reached out and took her hand, lacing our fingers together. Her hand was warm, her grip firm and sure. "Maya," I said softly, my voice steady. "It's time. Tell me." She took a deep, shuddering breath, her eyes fixed on our joined hands. She gave a single, resolute nod. The moment of revelation had finally arrived. "My mother," she began, her voice low and steady, though I could feel a fine tremor in her hand. "She loved you in a way that transcended mentorship. She saw you as the daughter she had chosen, the daughter she believed was worthy of every good thing this world could offer." I swallowed hard, the truth of her words resonating in the hollow of my chest. "But she also saw the isolation you curated," she continued, her gaze lifting to meet mine. Her eyes were dark with the weight of the memory. "She saw the formidable walls you built, brick by brick, how you let your work become both your shield and your prison. She told me, in her final days, that she was terrified you were walking the same path she had, building a beautiful, brilliant, but ultimately empty life." Tears welled in my eyes, spilling over without permission. It was the most profound and painful truth of my existence, one I had never dared to speak aloud. "A year ago," Maya said, her grip on my hand tightening, as if to anchor us both, "when she received her diagnosis, she called me home. For the first time, we really talked. She told me things she'd buried for a lifetime." She took another shaky breath, steadying herself. "She told me about a woman she had loved long before my father. A love that was all-consuming, passionate, and utterly impossible. For her family, for her career, for the world as it was then. She made the safe choice. She let her go. She married my father, she had me, she built this." She gestured around the room, "this beautiful, successful life." But she told me, with her last ounces of strength, that letting that woman go was the single greatest regret of her life. That a life built on a foundation of self-denial, no matter how impressive it looks from the outside, is a hollow victory. A single tear traced a clean path down Maya's cheek. I reached up and brushed it away with my thumb, my heart breaking not just for my own loss, but for Eleanor's, for the price she had paid for a life of propriety. "She saw you walking that same, safe path," Maya whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "And she made me promise, she made me swear that after she was gone, I would find you, that I would tell you her story, her secret, not as a burden, but as a key. She said, tell her my regret, so that it doesn't have to be hers. She believed, with every fiber of her being, that your person was out there. She didn't want you to be too afraid, or too proud, or too focused, to miss them." The air rushed from my lungs in a soft, stunned gasp. The secret wasn't about my parentage, or a hidden betrayal, or a professional slight. It was a warning from beyond the grave. A gift. A mother's final, desperate attempt to steer her chosen daughter away from the desolate cliffs of loneliness upon which she herself had been stranded. It was the most profound and heartbreaking act of love I had ever been offered. I stared at Maya. The pieces of the last few weeks, her guardedness, her intense observation, the painting, the electric touch in the studio, the life-altering kiss, all slotting into a perfect, breathtaking whole. But I stammered, my mind still grappling with the final, missing piece. "Why you? Why did it have to be you who told me?" Maya's eyes held mine, her gaze unwavering, filled with a love and a fear so deep and true it stole the last of my breath. "Because her other wish," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet every syllable was etched into my soul. Her deepest, most secret hope was that your person was me. The world stopped. Time folded in on itself. Eleanor, my brilliant, perceptive mentor, had not only diagnosed my loneliness, but had prescribed its cure in the form of her own daughter. From her deathbed, she had orchestrated this, weaving our separate griefs into a single tapestry, forcing us into proximity, trusting that the power of her story and the truth of our own hearts would do the rest. It was audacious. It was meddlesome. It was the most beautifully romantic and terrifying thing I had ever encountered. I looked at Maya, truly looked at her, the woman who had kissed me with the certainty of destiny, who had held me through the night and soothed the chronic ache in my soul, who understood the precise shape of the hole Eleanor had left because she carried an identical one within herself. The woman brave enough to undertake this heartbreaking, hopeful mission. The secret wasn't a bomb meant to destroy my past. It was a key, offered by a loving hand, to unlock my future. A sob escaped me, then another. I wasn't crying from sadness, but from the overwhelming, seismic shift happening within me. The walls I had spent a lifetime building, the ones Eleanor had seen so clearly, crumbled into dust, leaving me exposed, raw and utterly free. There was no fear anymore. There was only the stunning, liberating, glorious truth. I cupped her face in my hands, my thumbs stroking the elegant lines of her cheeks. She was right, I choked out, the words of vow, a prayer, a confession. Oh God, Maya, she was right. And I kissed her. I kissed her with all the gratitude I felt for her mother, with all the longing I had stored up for a lifetime, with all the hope for a future I never dared to imagine. It was a kiss of absolute acceptance, of breathtaking revelation, of a destiny embraced. She kissed me back with the same fervent, joyful intensity, her arms wrapping around me, holding me as if I were the most precious, cherished thing in the world. In that moment, in the quiet library filled with her mother's benevolent spirit, we weren't just honoring Eleanor's last wish. We were fulfilling it. We were choosing each other, not out of obligation, but out of a truth that felt as ancient and as solid as the foundations of the house around us. If it kept you hooked, subscribe now to Sapphic Tales so you never miss the next. The following months were a season of gentle, radiant healing. I moved out of my sterile glass and steel apartment and into a sun-drenched loft with Maya. We built a new space together, one that held the echoes of the past in the form of Eleanor, favorite armchair, and a few of her paintings, but that was, in its very soul, unequivocally ours. Her illustrations, once dominated by moody, somber tones, began to feature bursts of gold and cerulean blue. My own architectural designs, previously known for their sharp, imposing lines, now incorporated softer, more organic curves, spaces that invited connection rather than just admiration. We were changing each other, not by force, but by the gentle, persistent osmosis of love. One evening in early spring, we were back at the Victorian, sorting through the last few boxes in the studio. The secret was no longer a shadow between us, but the foundation stone upon which we had built our love. It was a story we would sometimes tell each other in whispered moments, not with sadness, but with a sense of awe at the invisible, loving hands that had guided us together. I was packing a crate of brushes, the bristles still holding the memory of Eleanor's touch, when my fingers brushed against something smooth and flat, tucked deep inside an old portfolio. I drew out a sealed envelope, my name inscribed on the front in Eleanor's elegant, familiar script. My heart stuttered, then swelled with a painful, sweet warmth. I showed it to Maya, my hands trembling. She looked at it, then at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and understanding. She simply nodded and moved to the window, giving me the space I needed. I sat on the floor, my back against a stack of canvases, the last of the evening light gilding the dust motes dancing in the air. With a reverent breath, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. My dearest girl, it began, and I could almost hear her voice, calm and clear. If you are reading this, then Maya has been brave, and you have been listening. And I am, hopefully, a fond memory that makes you smile more often than it makes you cry. I have watched you build your life like one of your beautiful structures, strong, impressive, and designed to withstand any storm. But a building is not a home until it is filled with love, with messy, complicated, glorious life. I feared your magnificent structure was empty. I am not asking for your forgiveness for my meddling, only for your understanding. A mother's love, even for a daughter she chose, is a fierce and sometimes irrational thing. I saw in Maya a spirit that could match yours, a depth that could understand your complexities, and a heart that was as lonely as your own. I saw a chance to give both of my daughters the love I believed they deserved. Do not live with my regret. Be braver than I was. Love out loud. Build a life that is not just impressive, but joyful. Take care of each other. All my love, always, Eleanor. I read the words once, then again, the tears flowing freely now, no longer tears of grief, but of cleansing, profound gratitude. They were warm and healing, washing away the last remnants of sorrow. Maya came and sat beside me, her shoulder pressing against mine, a solid, comforting presence. I handed her the letter without a word. She read it silently, her own tears tracing paths down her cheeks, falling onto the paper and smudging the ink in one or two places. When she finished, she looked at me, her eyes shining with a love so pure and deep it felt like looking into the sun. She gave us each other, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She gave us ourselves, I corrected softly, and I leaned in, capturing her lips with mine in a kiss that was a promise, a thank you, and a beginning, all at once. We left the studio as the first stars pricked the twilight sky. We walked through the wild, spring-scented garden, her hand firmly clasped in mine. The past was finally, completely at peace. The future was a blank canvas, stretching out before us, vast and bright, and we would paint it together in bold, brilliant, unapologetic color. If this story found a home in your heart, subscribe to Sapphic Tales for more journeys into love's many truths.